This is Delhi. Please stand by for our next program.
This is All India Radio. Good evening, listeners. Welcome to the National Program of Talks. 16th of August every year is observed as Deju Transfer Day in the Union Territory of Puducherry. This day marks the legal merger of Puducherry with the Indian Union in the year 1962. Indeed, a special day in the history of Puducherry, and the history of Puducherry has lot more important to offer to the history of India. One among that is Arikamedu, a famous archaeological site left with the traces of Roman relics in Puducherry. Arikamedu, located in the outskirts of Puducherry, is about 5 kilometers from Puducherry town and lies in the banks of Aiyappan river. The site is protected by Archaeological Survey of India. Indo-Roman trade links were unearthed in the ruins of Arikamedu. To discuss the saga of Arikamedu, we today have in our studio two eminent panelists. Dr. P. Ravichandran is an eminent archaeologist and also assistant professor in the Department of History, Tagore Arts and Science College, Puducherry. The other panelist we have today is Mr. Dominic Goodall, professor and head of Pondicherry Center of Ecole franchise d'Extrême Orient, EFEO, Puducherry. To begin with, let me start with you, Mr. Ravichandran. As far as Arikamedu is concerned, it is believed to be the first place and the only place that was excavated in the Coromandel coast with archaeological record of Roman presence in India. Could you please explain about this?
Yeah, that's the only place in the Coromandel coast, because the Roman presence based on the Roman pottery, Roman tableware in the sense of the personal wares, some food materials like soaked fish, and olive oil. Those fragments we've got large in Arikamedu itself. So this Arikamedu is possibly the Romans came here and settled temporarily for the trade and commerce. So this is the only place we have on the Coromandel coast.
Okay. Mr. Dominic, before excavation in this historical place, it was a coin made of gold or silver that turned the site as a place with an archaeological value. Could you please explain about this, how and when it was initially identified as an archaeological site?
In fact, it wasn't a coin. There have been no Roman coins discovered at Archaeological. Jouveau Dubreuil, who worked in Pondicherry, was born in Vietnam. He saw some of the fragments, particularly an intaglio showing the Emperor Augustus, and believed, therefore, that this should be excavated as a Roman site. And before him, the 18th century French astronomer Le Gentil had identified the interest of the place. So it is true that there was something a little bit like a coin, but to say the bust of a Roman emperor, which particularly sparked interest. But there had been long suspicions of the value of the site, and then Jouveau Dubreuil has launched with other collaborators Father Faucheux excavations in Arikamedu.
In the archaeological point of view, what is the importance of Arikamedu to the world, to India, and especially to South India, Professor Ravichandran?
Yeah, Arikamedu is a very, very important archaeological site. It was discovered by Radjy. Of course, the site is the most important to the world, because when you want to know about the Roman economic policy and Roman trade and Roman history, then they have to use to understand the Roman trades, Rome beyond its frontiers, like Wheeler said, so they have to come down to Arikamedu. They should know about what type of trade and commerce it's happened. So to know about the Roman trade and economy, so we need Arikamedu. It's the most important thing, So the Arikamedu is a very popular city. It's an international seaport also. And then second, it's very important to the Indian archaeology, because when you see about the history of Indian archaeology, Arikamedu is the first place where Wheeler introduced the scientific method of archaeology. It's the first place where he introduced the stratigraphy method in India. Later on, he used it in Harappa. And then in 1990s, we introduced the new system was called as a contest system. Contest system is different from the Wheeler's methodology. This is also a new method which was introduced to India. The first time it was introduced to India, it was applied in Arikamedu also. So in the history of, generally when you talk about the history of Indian archaeology, then the Arikamedu is the most important place for that. And then in South Indian archaeology, Arikamedu is the datum point for the whole South Indian archaeology. Wherever we are excavating, for example, if you are excavating Karnataka, or you are excavating in Andhra, you are excavating in Tamil Nadu, and wherever it is, if you find any Indian artifacts, up to date it. So you have to compare with the Arikamedu. Arikamedu is the datum point for the whole South Indian chronology. So Arikamedu got the terra sigillata, the Roman pottery with the sealed, Roman pottery as well as the Roman emperor George with the seals. It's exactly, it is dated. So whatever potteries we found along with the Roman pottery and the sealed Roman pottery above or below, we can date it exactly. So we can date the Indian potteries and based on the Arikamedu. So Arikamedu is the datum point for the South Indian archaeology. So as far as it's concerned, the whole world, India as well as the for South India, Arikamedu is the most important site.
You can add some more points.
May I just add one point there? So absolutely I agree with Professor Ravichandran. I think just one other thing that from the point of view of somebody interested in Sanskrit and the history of literature, the other thing that stands out, of course, about Arikamedu is that the discovery here of several fragments of pottery with scratched inscriptions in Brahmi script, but in what seems to be Tamil. And this, of course, is still the subject of a lot of discussion, exactly how to date this material. But in any case, some of the earliest samples of script in India, and India, of course, has this fabulous, extraordinarily rich in literary tradition with multiple channels, Sanskrit, Tamil, many other languages. And so from that point of view, Arikamedu also has a very important place in the history of things.
And we have many epigraphical evidence, like we have Tamil Brahmi, singular Brahmi, and even Orisan. So many languages are there in Brahmi. It's not only, Arikamedu we just excavated, we found Tamil Brahmi, we found this singular Brahmi. It's a metropolitan city. So many people came here. There are so many inscriptions at pottery. If you go to Pondicherry Museum. So
what does it mean? How we can understand this?
Tamil Brahmi, singular Brahmi. Singular Brahmi is the singular. Sri Lankan people came here. Orissa people came here. The whole Coromandel coast is lating with this trade and commerce. So many people, it's an ancient metropolitan city, many people came here and they made trade and commerce. As Dominic said, to date that also it's very easy. We can understand the paleographic things. To date the Brahmi, Tamil Brahmi, and it's very also helpful to us at the whole South Indian archaeology.
And as a part of excavation, what is Sir Wheeler's conclusion after excavation, Mr. Dominic?
Well, I think that Sir Mortimer Wheeler, so he started, as I was saying, Jouveau Dubreuil began digging in 1941 or something, and his idea was that this was a Roman port and might be identified with one of the Roman ports mentioned in ancient Greek texts, particularly the geography of Ptolemy and the Periplus written in by somebody unknown. There are various hypotheses about who might have written it, but it's a text in Greek which explains trading routes and things about the monsoon winds and a number of cities from basically Egypt, which was sort of the key from the point of view of the Roman world to opening out towards the east. And it mentions a number of cities, so famously it mentions Muziris, which some people identify with Pattanam in Kerala, which is the major Roman port site, or contemporary port site on the Malabar coast. And it mentions a string of other places further along the coast, and one of these places is Puducherry. Poduka, I think are the two forms given in the Periplus. Because of the similarity of the name, the modern name of Pondicherry, which has of course many forms, Puducherry, Puducherry, Pondicherry. On the basis of that similarity alone, really, he thought, well, perhaps this Poducherry mentioned in the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea is the port site mentioned by geographers in Greek literature. On the other hand, we know that Arikamedu is a relatively stable port site. Many of the other sites used as ports in this period moved about because of shifting sandbars, changing courses of rivers and so forth. But the particular geography of Arikamedu, or rather this site, which no doubt was called something else at that time, we don't know what. One particularity of it is because of the way the rivers are around it are, it stayed relatively stable as a port. So all of that is context to Jouveau Dubreuil identifying or proposing an identification of Puducherry in the Greek geographers with this place. Wheeler was interested in a way in confirming that, and I think what he concluded, and this is largely on the basis of ceremology, is that because we found a lot of fragments of pottery which came from the Mediterranean world, this was indeed a major Roman port site. I think what has changed since Sir Mortimer Wheeler dug is that now we know that a lot of the pottery that he thought came from the Mediterranean, namely what is called rouletted ware.
Yes.
This rouletted ware does not, in fact, come from the Mediterranean, and this is the conclusion of the team of archaeologists under Vimala Begli, with whom Professor Ravichandran worked back in the 1980s, that a lot of this ware, this rouletted ware, is in fact Indian production. And one of the things that is a bit uncertain still is exactly where all this rouletted ware was coming from, because the expanse of rouletted ware goes from Egypt in the west right across into Southeast Asia, far into the east. And a lot of this rouletted ware seems really to have been produced in India with Indian technology and has spread across this vast area because of trade. But exactly where was it being produced? Were there multiple centres? There's some suggestion that the clay came from Bengal, from the analysis of Vimala Begli. And somebody in the Deccan College in Pune, I think you were saying. But rouletted ware is, in fact, not to be dated in the narrow envelope around the period of time of the Emperor Augustus, which was what Sir Mortimer Wheeler supposed, but is in fact a much broader phenomenon and probably earlier. It predates the Roman site, and that suggests that this site, Arikamedu, as we're calling it, is in fact not just a Roman period site, but is also an earlier site. It predates Roman trade, and that too is very interesting in the light of literary fragments, that's to say these small pieces of script, Brahmi script, with different messages which are difficult to interpret. We no longer need to assume that they all belong to exactly this period around the Emperor Augustus.
Well, Mr. Ravichandran, in the subsequent investigations and excavations in Arikamedu, you worked with Dr. Vimala Begli. What is the pivotal role of glass beads in this historical place?
We have two types of the bead making industries in Arikamedu. So when we excavated, we found a large number of beads, both of glass and stone beads. Beads are most interesting one because the Arikamedu is filled with a lot of waste. Now we can find a lot of beads right there. These beads are exported to the Roman realm. So the most interesting thing we have, Romans are crazy about the emerald. And then there is one type of stone we have in Coimbatore region, that emerald.
Similar to that of
similar,
emerald.
the same color and same type of things, but it's not really emerald. It's a semi-precious stone. So this type of manufacturing beads, they exported to Rome, and because middle-class Romans, they bought this. Not only the bead making industry, we have textile industries, shell bangle industries are there in Arikamedu. Roman coins, whatever we found in India, are not real. It's Peter Burgess, who was a specialist in the Roman coins, who studied. Also, he was also in our team, and he studied the Roman coins. But we didn't find any Roman coins in Arikamedu. Roman coins are mostly chiseled mark. There is a chisel mark on the top. We can open it. Whatever Roman coins found in India, it has the chisel mark. Chisel mark in the sense make the Romans invalid the coins in the customs.
But it's not the original one.
No, the original one has the chisel mark, and then duplicates also have the chisel mark. Duplicates are how he said it, that the iconography, the mint, the work, the artistic of the Roman coins seems the duplicate. He found a lot of Roman duplicate coins in India. The materials, it's a barter system. But as the Romans have the monetary system. So the Roman coins went back to the Rome. Copper is the most important one. So the copper was imported to India from Rome in coins.
Because in the form of coins.
Because in the form of coins. Because the copper is the most important one. We need a lot of copper in India. So they imported the copper coins largely. Regarding the excavations, and Wheeler excavated, he just dated it's the 1st century to 2nd century. And the Kessal in 1950, he excavated Mundigad in Harappan site. He came to Pondicherry. After 5 years, he started excavation. Most of his excavation reports were not noticed because it is published in French. As well as it is immediately published after Wheeler. His report was very popular at the time rather than the Kessal reports. Of course, after Vimala only the Kessal report very popular. Kessal excavated vast area, and he was the first archaeologist who discovered the earliest settlement of Arikamedu. He dated back, early habitation of Arikamedu was dated back to 3rd century BC. Was a different type of people were called as megalithic. Megalithic in the sense we can call it the Iron Age people. That was the black and red ware people. So those type of people were first settled in Arikamedu, and later the Roman trade came and the city was developed. That was his report. After that he started to excavate Sutikeni. That's very close to Arikamedu, Mutrapalayam, and there's some Iron Age burial sites. That is a very interesting one. Sutikeni burial got the gold jewel treasure box. We got the bangles, we got the pendant, we got the gold chains and armlets, earrings, beads, as a lot of gold.
Which belongs to which year?
The 3rd century BC is an Iron Age period. Almost maybe the contemporary of the Arikamedu early settlers.
Okay.
It's possible. So equated, but because of the trade and commerce, these people got this much richness of the gold and other things. But this is the only burial in India where we got this much of treasure from one burial.
Oh.
One burial we got. Of course, he said
which was excavated in the year
1950.
Okay.
That was a very famous treasure.
What stimulated him to excavate in Mutrapalayam and
Mutrapalayam, almost Mutrapalayam is an archaeological site which was noticed there by early people. He focused on the Roman trade and the Roman pottery, Roman contemporary potteries of Indian potteries, everything. But the Goodall who found the early deposit was the black and red ware culture, who were the first people. And then they were the Iron Age people. From there to Roman trade ways. So that is the first concept. So he wanted to know about the Mutrapalayam. Mutrapalayam and Sutikeni was very close Iron Age sites. So he excavated Mutrapalayam and finally he excavated Sutikenis. But Vimla excavated in 90s because her objective is different, because she wanted to know about the related ware dating. But she identified the Roman trade from the various parts. For example, she identified different types of Roman amphora jars and terra sigillata A, terra sigillata B, and so many types of terra sigillata. Terra means red glazed ware. It's a Roman tableware. It's manufactured in different places in different dates. So we have 4 types of terra sigillata in Arikamedu alone, and we have different seals also there. That is the datum point for the Arikamedu. We got amphora from England, we got amphora from Rhodes Island, we got amphora from Italy. In Pondicherry Museum itself, I found the 7 types of amphoras which are different places. Up to 600 the trade was there because we found the Roman artifacts. Then after that there is some break, we don't have the evidence, but the Chola coins, Chola pottery, Chola roof tiles we found. So the architectures of some Cholas maybe we've identified. And after the Cholas, almost 15th century, Chinese pottery we found. So the site Arikamedu was occupied even in the medieval period. After the medieval period, the French, there is a break in 15th and 16th century. There is a 100 years, there is a break of the people almost completely started to decline the whole site. But later on the French people came, and in 1700 they constructed the French mission house. Right now what we have on the surface, the building, the ruins. But they used the ancient bricks. The ancient bricks and the French bricks, they use both. So that building is a very small, seems, but it's very big complex. Up to 1800 we have continuous occupation. From 300 BC down to 1800 AD we have the Arikamedu cultural deposit. That is the thing which was made by Vimla. So after Vimla, I went to Egypt. I want to make how the goods were transported to Egypt, to Roman Empire. That's a very interesting one. All the Roman goods reached Alexandria, the mouth of the Red Sea, Nile River. From there to Red Sea, they crossed the Eastern Desert. And then from Eastern Desert to Red Sea Port to India. This is the way how they transported the goods. 3 types of ships were used in this trade. One is the Mediterranean ships, which was sailed to Alexandria, so Mediterranean ports. Then from Alexandria to Cactus, mid of the Nile River. So they used Nile ships, so river boats, to transport the goods. From there to Red Sea, it's a desert. There is a Roman made a lot of Roman roads, water stations for the traders, watchtowers. So how much money they spent for the trade and commerce. So the goods has transported to the land. It reached Red Sea port. From Red Sea to India is a ship. It's a different. It's a huge ship. It has to travel in the oceans. So this type of trade we have. So imagine Arikamedu has a vast transportation to bring the goods and to export the goods also.
Mr. Dominic, we have evidences of Roman trade in India, especially in Arikamedu. And my question is there any evidence about exchange of Indian culture, Tamil culture, architectural exchange in and around Italy?
Well, we cannot measure specifically Pondicherry's impact on Italy, but what we can find, of course, is, as Professor Ravichandran was mentioning, artifacts that make their way around the world to different places. So going further east, beads that have reached Thailand, and pieces of pottery, rouletted ware that is distinctively Indian, and some of it might be South Indian, though of course there may be several centres of production. We find also many luxury objects that were being traded are of course perishable. They're things that do not survive.
Okay.
So just as the Romans may have been bringing in large amounts of currency in which little dent marks were made so as to invalidate them, but many of them, as you mentioned, were being melted down and made into other objects. On the other side, of course, wine and olive oil which is brought in is all consumed or has rotted, and also the garum sauce, this strange condiment made from rotted fish, which the Romans relished. But in the other direction, pepper, ivory, and textiles. But of course textiles don't survive. Pepper gets used. Ivory often doesn't survive, but there's one rather spectacular survival in Pompeii. Pompeii is a South Italian city on the Bay of Naples, which was discovered by a layer of volcanic ash in 79 AD. Enormous volcanic explosion, the explosion of Vesuvius, covered the entire city and several other smaller towns around it. But it left a sort of museum still being gradually dug out and discovered since the 18th century. And in that we find the houses of wealthy persons, the houses of not so wealthy persons, bordellos, pubs, every kind of thing making up a city, all somehow fossilized by this great explosion. And in one of the well-appointed smart villas in Pompeii, there is a spectacularly beautiful little figurine made out of ivory, sometimes referred to
ivory carvings,
and a carving out of an ivory tusk.
Okay.
And it represents a lady rather larger than her two servant ladies who are standing holding things for her. And some people have identified it with Lakshmi.
Goddess Lakshmi.
As with the goddess Lakshmi. So this is one of those cases where a rare survival of an artifact in more or less the condition it was made in. Let's say you can still see the beauty of the sculpture, and there it is, and it survives in the museum in Naples, which has all kinds of fascinating things. So this is an example of a trace of India which has actually survived.
In addition to that, Indian materials also we found in Egypt.
Okay.
We have found many Roman jars, fragments with the poisonous cement. It is from the volcano of the Pompeii. What he said, Dominic said in 79 there was a volcano. The volcano, of course, it gave the tragedy. Sometimes it brings good things also. So it brought the type of good minerals from the volcano. That mineral was used to construct many buildings, cementing materials. That is, Romans used that same minerals we found in the emperor's jars. It's sticking, largely found in Arikamedu, below the water level. So below the water level, that what Elizabeth Betty, she was emperor specialist. She said that maybe the port was constructed possibly by the Indians with the help of the Romans.
Yes. Mr. Dominic, you are dealing with literature. Is there any mentions or references about this historical place in any of the literature you are dealing with?
And there are mentions in Sangam literature of the trade of ships which bring in wine and so forth. And there are mentions of relevant items that might have been traded. But we do also find, do we not, in pieces of Brahmi inscribed material in Egypt.
Yeah.
So there are potsherds of various kinds which show that writing itself was also moving. The site where they discovered a sort of rubbish dump in Egypt of where a lot of papyrus fragments were discovered. And mostly these are Greek texts, but one of them is seems to be a Greek drama based on Iphigenia and Tauris, but set in a South Indian port town, where it seems that some of the heroine and some of her a group of people are speaking a language which seems to be an old Dravidian language in the middle of this play, which is otherwise in Greek. So, in other words, there are these sparse pieces of evidence which allow us to tie together the literary. If the name of the place was Puducherry, then it is mentioned in the Periplus. But that's a very big if.
Okay. Is there any geographical importance of this particular place, Arikamedu, on par with rest of the places in Coromandel coast? I mean, what attracted them? Is there any specific reason they have come all the way from Rome to this particular place?
Many other harbours are not stable enough. As I say, a sandbar might form in the mouth of the river, and the course of the river might change.
Okay.
So, in answer to your question, why did the Romans come here? Yes. Well, in a way, it's not really just Roman trade came this way anyway, because there were all sorts of products of interest. And they wanted luxury items, and then this was a place which lent itself partly because of the geographical formation of the place, but partly also because there was already a community of people heavily involved in trade, namely trade in beads, which they were manufacturing out of various
varieties of beads, glass beads, stone beads with various colors has been found in Arikamedu. What kind of technology they would have used before 2000 years ago?
Two types of bead industries. One is a melting and drawing, that is a glass beads, and another one is a stone beads. So the melting and drawing means that is a silicon. They will add some copper for the green and iron for the red, magnesium.
Different metal oxides.
Different metal oxides. They manufacture the yellow color or green color, and then red color, blue color, all this type of glass beads they manufacture. But most of the glass beads are not transparent. It's melted and drawn. It may be cylinder. They give the pressure at the center, it become a collar bead. They craft it at the edge, it become a circular or cylinder, different shapes. And the furnace was heated with the materials, and they drawn with the tube. It's just like a tube with a hole. And they craft chipped that tube in a small. In a small size, it becomes circle. If it is a bigger one, it's an elongated, it's a cylinder. If it is pressed in the middle, it is a collar bead. It's an ancient technology.
Some records shows that these type of glass beads are found in Bali, Japan.
Yeah, the technology spread all over the Southeast Asia. Okay. It's not only in India, because India is very popular. Also in Southeast Asia, the beads are manufactured because they manufactured there also. So that we call it as Southeast Asian beads. Okay. South Pacific beads. What Peter Francis is a specialist in bead industry. He named it as a Pacific beads. But the glass beads were called as a Pacific beads. So these glass beads manufactured even in Southeast Asia and everywhere. But Arikamedu is the number one industry in the Southeast Asia. That is he mentioning. And there is a bead making industry in Southeast Asia, Bali, Indonesia, and other places also. And Arikamedu is the popular one. It is the number one bead making industry in the ancient period, because that much of wastage still we are finding it out. Okay. So that much treasure we have. Arikamedu is a very famous site. As the most important site we have to preserve.
We were listening to an interview with Dr. P. Ravichandran and Mr. Dominic Goodall on the saga of Arikamedu, a beacon of ancient India's Indo-Roman trade. The panelists were interviewed by Rewakisvary. This program was recorded and produced by All India Radio, Puducherry.
This program came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.